This is actually where the first prototype started. I remember I was a kind of a kid. I have two older brothers. We had like this one family PC, like this old Pentium, and like this one chair, and then you have to take turns. One thing I've been noticing is like, there's kind of like a stagnation and kind of fresh strategy games. People have different opinions on this, but I feel like chess is like really cool as a game, very beautiful medium. There's something beautiful about the universal language of chess. There's a saying that if you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you ship too late. To recap, short version is start simple, pen and paper, playtest doesn't matter, get the first prototype, iterate, get in the real world, and then just keep doing it, repeat and rinse and repeat. But like, we just need to worry about how to get to the next round. And then once we're there, we can worry about the next one, instead of like having to worry about the one like a million one farther. But more importantly, the community and players can be much better creators without having to know anything about AI, about tech, you can just play around with the tools.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Game Makers Lounge. We are continuing our founder spotlight journey. Last time we had our friend Aaron. This time we have an exciting guest in Sammy, who's the CEO and founder of Echo Chunk. If you've heard of a new game that is slowly becoming everyone's morning addiction along with Wordle, it is Sammy's game, Echo Chess. Really excited to have you here, Sammy. Would love for you to, introduce yourself, and excited to talk to you about the company that you're building.
But before you start, I just want to add that these guys still post their move count for your game every morning in our random chat. And I stopped posting because for the epic challenge, I can't beat Vineet or AJ, and so I just stopped posting.
Oh my god! There is no shame in like playing any mode. A solve is a solve. It doesn't matter how inefficient it is, which mode it is. I keep seeing people like just solve things way better than I have, and like create puzzles that I can't even solve. So appreciate it, and it's awesome you guys are doing this. Also, thanks guys for having me. I'm super happy to be chatting. Thanks AJ, CJD. You guys are doing awesome stuff.
Of course, glad to have you here.
So Sammy, let's start with your journey. We would love to know where you're from, what's your background, how did you get into the gaming business, and then how did you eventually obviously start Echo Chess? We'll get there, but would love to hear your background first.
For sure, man. So I've always been like obsessed with like strategy games. I don't know if you guys can see here, kind of the background with. I'll try to turn a bit here, but yeah, I think the running joke is like when I sold everything out, went on the road. The only thing I had to store was just like a bunch of board games and like random games. You guys get it. But yeah, I originally started. Like, I learned chess when I was around 3 years old. I had like to do some kind of like medical op or something, and then just people get you gifts, and like someone just brought like this really nice chessboard. My dad taught me, and it was awesome. I love the game, and then started loving all strategy games ever since. Obviously, still have it here. This is actually this is where the first prototype started. Like this exact wooden board.
Oh wow! All right, okay, save that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I remember I was a kind of a kid. I have two older brothers, and so we had like this one family PC, like this old Pentium. And like there's one chair, and then you have to take turns, and then when you can play on it. I was like the younger one, so like you have to like really try to find creative ways to call dibs on it. So I would wake up like literally around like 4 a.m. or something before they wake up, and just so I can get spots there. I used to love like Heroes of Might and Magic. I don't know if you guys play it. Like I love the home series. I still play actually like Heroes 3. They have like this awesome PvP community now with this Horn of the Abyss mod. It's really cool. I mean, all of their games are good. So like I used to wake up early, do this at night, basically do the custom maps. Like they have a really nice map editor. It's a great game altogether. I love turn-based strategy games, all types of strategy games, RTS, 4X, MOBAs, before we even call them MOBAs, all these different things. And so basically I think like coming naturally into like where we are today, like we became kind of more like an adult gamer. And very happily. and so I think one thing I've been noticing is like, there's kind of like a stagnation and kind of fresh strategy games. There's a lot of really interesting games, a lot of them are kind of like more sequels or like remasters, kind of interesting takes on the same ideas. And if you think about like, there hasn't been like really a big like really massive change in how we think about strategy games. Maybe probably going back to like, I don't know, like D&D. You just basically quantify some imagination. You just put some dice rolls. You think
Yeah.
of the words as kind of like numbers for things, and they took from like war games before it. But yeah, so I think the general idea is like the field kind of like didn't change that much. And I was thinking like, okay, like there are obviously like a lot of people are super excited about this field. There's a lot of demand for it. I mean, you see even old games like chess that are like a zillion years old.
They're
People are
evergreen.
getting upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I figure like maybe like there's like room for like fresh ideas. And I think especially like these days, which is really awesome, is like you can actually do way more, experiment with a lot of different ideas and much faster because of things like AI. You can actually just have a kernel of an idea and like new mechanics and then try them out quickly, have different board states, different game states, and try with players, and the game itself can improve, and you can actually have like a fresh take on things. And so I figured, okay, like if it's ever going to happen, now is the time. So let's
Yeah.
try it out. And start with chess. I think chess, we can talk more about it, but I think like my 2 cents there is like, this might be like kind of like a contrarian perspective. I get it. People have different opinions on this, but I feel like chess is like really cool as a game, very beautiful medium. But it's almost like because it has centuries of optimization, and kind of like there's a competitive scene, and so I think kind of like evolved into like a meta where you memorize openings, and then you have like mate and X maneuvers, and it's always like the same kind of starting point, and then it becomes more about like how well do you know the game and how long have you been playing it versus like first principles, and it's almost a bit like of a gatekeeping for newcomers. So we okay, like what if you switch up things and anyone can just pick it up very easily, super easy to learn, but still really hard to master. And then have things where like, boards can generate like in real time, you can have like roguelite things and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like the kernel idea. And obviously from there, kind of built up the first game and think, okay, like we can reuse that same playbook for so many other games, and long term kind of like a platform for creating better puzzle and strategy games with this cooler co-creation process.
But Sammy, I do have a question. So, did you pick chess or were you trying two, three other, different games? And yeah, chess stuck. So, would love to hear how that journey unfolded.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent question. So actually, like, obviously, like chess, I think has this characteristic I was describing. But ironically, when I was first starting with this, because I love like turn-based strategy games, I
Yeah.
was thinking, okay, like let's do something that's kind of chess inspired, that has like this really beautiful element of a soul that like kind of easy to learn, hard to master, but it's actually people wouldn't recognize as chess because like like there's so much more you can do. You can go like way crazier with the type of things you can do. And the interesting part of the design process, like you try like multiple iterations, multiple different games, and some of them I think like, are still amazing ideas where we explore. I think is like there's something beautiful about the universal language of chess. It's kind of like no matter where you are in the world, you don't need to know like you know English or any language. You just see chess
Yep.
pieces. Even if you never played chess, at least you've seen them in pop culture at some point in your life,
Yep.
and you can kind of understand what's going on, right? So you don't need to go through a process of like, hey, let's explain like world building and like kind of the what's going on here and like the move sets and how to get started. Like, there's a kind of 20-30 minute period of on ramp before you understand how to orient yourself, and then you can start enjoying the game. And I think the interesting part that happens actually, I kind of went back into like simplifying by kind of like a design by like subtraction if you want versus addition. Okay, let's go back to the kernel and then start with something like chess. And I think maybe a good analogy is if you think about like when you're creating like 3D things in the physical world, you have like kind of like editing, manufacturing, also kind of 3D printing or whatever, and you add things, or like you having like Play-Doh, you put them on top of each other. And then you have like subtractive, like when you sculpt. And
Yeah.
there's like this saying, I'm gonna butcher the saying, but like some famous old sculptor, probably older than like old times, probably a Michelangelo. Honestly, guys, fact check me. I'm probably wrong. Someone
There's no
amazing.
fact checking here.
But my point is that like there's a really nice saying that like basically they would like look at this giant block of stone or something and then see the sculpture in it, and just you remove all the extra stuff and then you end up with the kernel that actually matters. And I think there's something interesting that like obviously you're not seeing it ahead of time. It's like iterative, but like this is how you end up with just the kernel that makes sense. I think there's something similar with game design where sometimes you remove a lot of the extra stuff that you can re-add later if needed, but then you bring it down to like the most distilled version, in this case, kind of like just chess movement. And then
Yep.
from there, you actually can do beautiful things because you're actually constrained in your design. And I think the constraints that you put on like your imagination actually like stress test like how you're imagining things about things, and then like you can be like, okay, like what if we relax this assumption, that other one, and I think it's a much more valuable process than starting with like a complete like blank canvas and saying, okay, like let's boil the ocean. And so yeah, that's something I've noticed over time, that that subtractive process is actually more helpful for creativity than one would expect.
Yeah, that's neat. That's very cool. You're almost
Yeah,
forced
look
to
who
work a
said it.
little
I wonder if
harder
it's Michelangelo.
at.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
not
What were you
checking.
saying? Susan?
I think it's Michelangelo.
Yeah, I saw the angel on the marble and carved until I set him free. Beautiful. Okay, I butchered the quote, but that's what he said.
It's like before the internet, where we just repeated things that were wrong until someone told us the right way.
Yeah, I think that quote actually was from Michelangelo as well. Like, don't trust anything on the internet.
uh, so Sammy, continuing down this train though, right? Which is, all right. So you have an idea. I mean, you're a gamer. You love, puzzle making games. You had this concept of you want to make it, go back to the kernel, make a minimalistic game, but fun. What's the next step? Were you a programmer? You still have to put a piece of software in front of someone. So what was that journey like?
Love it. Okay, great. So yeah, so I think like the best way to think about it is like, there's a saying that if you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you
Yeah.
ship too late. And I think it's like I definitely did not ship too late. You guys know how it's like. And so like
Yeah.
definitely like now there's multiple iterations that have happened, like have made the game so much better. But I think like the key thing is, I like to think that you have to start with the going back to the kernel. You have to start with like what is the smallest possible version of this that would actually prove the idea, and then you can play test it and really get people to try it out. So, and that's a kind of universal principle. Like you can do this for your early version of the game. You can keep iterating on it. It goes in different directions. You can do different game modes, different mechanics, different new features you want to put, new games, and in general, like any idea broader than games, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's a universal principle for a reason. I think like sometimes you get in your own head too much, and it's very important just to get the ideas out, put them in the world, get real humans to interact with them, and then realize, okay, like I was very wrong about this assumption, and this is
Yeah.
actually a much more fun way to do it. And to this day, we see like a lot of players providing like excellent feedback on things, and be like, okay, wow, that's actually much better take to go about it. Or sometimes we're overbuilding. Like let's go back to like what actually really matters. And I think like, okay, so if you zoom out and think about what does that mean, I think like one way to think about EchoChess in particular is that you have to keep in mind is it kind of happened very organically. It's not like you just did like some committee of people sitting in a room and be like, hey, like let's try to change the world, and like what
Yeah.
are some like 100 ideas that will be big, and then walk back from this and then come up with like most obvious ways that anyone can do, like in like market research or whatever, and then you end up with on the ground, no one really cares by playing the game. And I think
Yeah.
I think the better approach, I like to think, is kind of more bottom up. It's like basically you have some insight, you have something that you feel like is fun, try it out with people, and get it in the hands of people and iterate, and then get it better and better. And so, what does that look like concretely with something like EchoChess? I mean, honestly, the first version was just literally like pen and paper, like literally pen and paper designs of like grids and like checkerboards, and like, okay, what if like we have like an enemy here, or like this is the character, this is the kind of the movement rules, just like scratch that, like no, what if there's like some kind of concept of turns and timer, and like okay, what if there's some stochastic enemies, just again kind of
Yeah.
doing that sculpting process I was describing. And then the nice thing with props, or having something that people can just play around with before you even like write the first line of code, I like to think, is like if you have something that like is very easily play testable and physical props, I think that's even better, because like odds are like people are gonna be able to just really like not think about the tech and then focus on the toy element of it, and then it becomes like an actual game, a bit meaningful. And so just you have like literally like a physical chessboard. In fact, like one thing that I even tried is like I bought like a bunch of extra sets of pieces, from like eBay or Craigslist, whatever. And then now you have like a lot of these different pieces, and you can try things like, okay, like what if like the echoing mechanism, echoing mechanic, which is kind of core to EchoChess, where you capture a piece, turn into that piece, and then now you have a new piece with new piece rules, and you can go. You can literally just be the game engine yourself at the beginning by just having someone try out the game. And like if like CJD is like a like a knight, and like you move around with your knight, and then like you just captured a bishop, whether it's like my bishop or just like a single player, whatever, then I can be the game master, right? Like taking inspiration from something like D&D, and I can remove the old piece, put a new piece of that color. And if you have extra sets, you can just do so many of these things. So anyway, you can do
Yeah.
that play testing. Obviously, you want to get to something that's a bit less laughably not scalable and you can try
Yeah.
out at distance. And so I think this is where you just build the first prototype. And I think that's nice. Like these days, we're very like fortunate to be like kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say. And we can just have a much faster idea to prototype, kind of cycle. And then more importantly, from playable prototype to like next version and the next version and so on. And I think this is
Yeah.
where like a lot of the tech can help, in platforms, things like Snapster. I think honestly, it's amazing. If you're getting to the point where you want to add like, multiplayer or different snaps or whatever, I definitely encourage anyone honestly to just start with reusing epic stuff that other people have built. Smart people like Snapster, that's what we use as well. But also I think like on a more kind of baby version in your own iteration process, just use like tools that will make your life easier so you can really focus on the craft itself and like that learning cycle. And then, AI can help with all of that. And honestly, we think part of the longer vision is like as AI being a co-pilot and helping you iterate on these is also going to be like super helpful. So anyway, to recap, short version is start simple, pen and paper, playtest doesn't matter, get the first prototype, iterate, get in the real world, and then just keep doing it, repeat and rinse and repeat. Otherwise, you're just building things that like no one wants to actually play.
It's so fascinating you brought up that you actually went for, creating a physical prototype, like it's become so digital nowadays. Everyone just thinks about just putting something on like software, but I love that angle that you brought in. So who were your first play test? Was it your family you were showing it to your friends? And how did you come up with this echo mechanic? Was it trial and error and you thought, yeah, this is it. This is where the fun is, and then you took that digital step, is it?
Okay, excellent question. So I think there's two parts. Let me talk about the first part first. If I
Yeah,
forget the second one, please remind me. First part
yeah,
is like, where do I get the first play testers or
yeah,
players? Honestly, man, just whatever. Like, just get players. If it's like, just like your neighbors, your family, like friends,
yeah,
like just go on the street. Doesn't matter. Just basically, I think the main thing that I would advise, and just, I'm just a random guy on the internet, whoever's watching. So just don't trust me. But for whatever it's worth, what I would recommend is just get it out of your head into the real world, let it become its own thing, and then, bump against other people's opinions. And then this is how you get to the point where, like, hopefully someday the game becomes bigger than you and it has its own meta, its own community, its own assumptions. And I mean, now like, there's so many things about Echo Chess. When I see people playing, it's like, oh my God, I didn't even imagine someone thinking about it this way. And then you would
yeah,
never get to that beautiful spot if you're just in your own head. So I think step one, just find anyone, doesn't matter. Right. I
yeah,
think also like, one quick note on the physical prototyping. I think in that case it helps. Like, hey, like I love programming, man. Like, I mean, I built the first version of this game and it's still actively programming, obviously. But also that means like, all the things, like, the front end, back end, like the AI model that uses like just procedure generation, like things like, having to worry about like level design, every single aspect, right? And I think it's really fun. But I think that the drawback there, especially for people, who are like makers and builders and like just geek out about beautiful code and like, less beautiful code, but like just being able to get
yeah,
things done or whatever. I think the drawback is that you can spend way more time than is beneficial for the game on the things that are not the game. And I think like, especially
hmm,
if like what is the game or what is the mechanic is gonna change like 100 times, then like you might be like putting your and it's not just like time. Even if you're like someone who can code in like 2 seconds, I think it's like the brain has two modes almost. Like there's like the creative, open-ended, like this wall doesn't exist mode, and then there's
yeah,
like the pragmatic. Okay, let's actually like take the vision and make it real. And I think like you want at the early phases just to remove all the assumption and allow your brain to just be creative. And I think
yeah,
if you're overbuilding or over engineering things, like you're not allowing your brain the freedom to just relax assumptions and come up with something actually novel, like pushing through what's already out there. So I think
yeah,
physical prototypes, whether it's for you or for the players, like it's just like scratch the board, like literally. Like, okay, what if
yeah,
you turn a piece upside down? Like, to give you an idea, like the Echo Chess has like these walls and obstacles. Literally,
yeah,
my first implementation was put the piece sideways on the board. And I think this is where it helps, coming from like someone who loves board games and like tabletop RPGs or whatever. Like you tend to see
Magic.
things.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, I think this is where I think it helps to think of like everything can be a presentation of anything. And so, like, let's just agree on something, a rule system or whatever, some language, and just move on. And then you can actually try the mechanic itself. So I would also, as a side note, if someone's building like a board game, I would definitely like encourage just like, start with whatever, even if you want to do it like a virtual remote one, just do something like tabletop simulator or whatever, where you just go in and just play stuff together. Anyway, that's kind of like the first part. Second part, if I remember correctly, was basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, it was basically like, how did you kind of land on the echoing mechanic?
Yes.
And then,
Yep.
is this something that, okay, cool. And okay, I think that's a great question. So I'll tell you about this, but I think after that, I think one thing that's
So for
interesting is
those
how you think
for
about
those
like,
who've not played Echo Chess, I do want to help them realize what is the echo mechanic. So in chess, when you take someone else's piece, you actually remove that piece from the board. But in Sammy's version of Echo Chess, you become that piece. And for those, please go to echochess.com and give it a try. But Sammy, that I think is a phenomenal mechanic, and it's adding a whole new dimension to chess. How did you come up with that?
thank you, thank you, AJ. Yeah, I think definitely I probably should have explained a bit first what is the game. Short, AJ explained really well. Short version for like the goal of the game for whoever is new. That you're trying to clear a board of all the pieces. You play as one color. There's no opponent. You just go around the board. The echoing mechanic that you just described. There's obstacles and walls that makes it really tricky because let's say like you're a queen. You go and capture a pawn. Now you've lost all your movements around the board as a queen. Now you're stuck being a pawn. You just walk in one dimension. And then because there's obstacles and like and different piece types, the order matters so much. So like if you end up getting stuck here, you can go somewhere else, and the boards are unique and yada yada. Interestingly, I think that mechanic has way more potential just beyond just chess. I think the underlying game design mechanic there is like basically you're infiltrating the target, right? You're becoming that. I mean, in some sense, maybe like I don't know. You can think of maybe the closest thing I can think of in like other game genres, but just not exactly that. It's probably like Hitman. Like you get an opponent, you kind of like get their outfit or like some kind of like stealthy game. It's not exactly that, but I think like that's one way to think about it. I think that mechanic is completely under tap for like strategy games, and I'll tell you 1 second. But how do I get to it? So obviously playtesting helps a lot. Trying different iterations. I think like having some kind of like hypothesis, or like what are you trying, like what is it that's bothering you about the current medium or the current like status quo with these games that you're trying to like innovate on. And sometimes it's just like a feeling, right? It's just like something here, I can shake it out of place. And I think like there's three things like this with some games like chess, right? And I played tons of turn-based strategy games. My favorite genre, like grids. And actually my friends make fun of me because I have a folder. I don't know if we should put this, but it's fine. I have a folder on my phone that's just called cool hexes or something like that. And it's just like, anywhere I'm around the world, if I see like a really interesting pattern on the floor tiles, like they have nice hexes, or like, some airport has some like whatever wall somewhere, some like a coloring book. I just have like random pictures of in my journey around the world. I have like cool hexes. And I feel like someday like these might turn into like cool board ideas. Some of them. There's an interesting video on people should look up. It's like hexagons are the bestagons. I realize the irony because like my first game is actually not a hex grid, but anyway, I think there's something beautiful about hexes, how you can combine them. You can go like 3D and anyway. But the point is like I think for chess, one thing that, as I mentioned earlier, with chess openings, whatever, was really bothering me about how the meta is evolving. And so I was like, bothered me to the point that like, hey, like there's a problem, someone should fix it. Might as well be me, right? And they just start something. And if it's not, someone else finds it online, does it better, that's great, right? But I think that part, switching up the assumptions and which actually changes the entire meta. So for chess, for example, let's say you have like a queen defended by a pawn. Now I have a queen. I go and capture your queen in traditional chess. You're one queen down. You capture my queen with your pawn. I'm one queen down. We traded a queen. In Echo Chess, if we were to do the same kind of exchange, I capture your queen, become a queen. Now you capture my queen with your pawn, also become a queen. So now you're one pawn down, I'm one queen down. And so now like the trade is like bad, it's asymmetric, but also that means like your defense strategy is all different. And if you have like pawns, they're actually much more lethal because every one of your 8 pawns can actually instant promote on capture. Your higher, more major pieces can actually demote if they do the wrong capture, but hey, they can also walk around fast around the board. And so they're still very important, but it's almost like a one-use only chess, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of implications there, say for forks and whatever. So I think one thing is switching up things. Second one is like, I wanted to kind of experiment with some kind of like idea where, and I really feel like, I haven't seen this in other game genres. I'm sure someone's done it, which is great. I want to play those games. But basically the concept where if you're like going around the world, like there's opponents or enemies, in most games, I mean, think about it, honestly, even FPS, RPG, whatever the genre is, most games, there's an enemy. You either avoid that enemy or like you just kill that enemy, right? And then you beat that enemy and then you move on. Like, you maybe power up, get something, whatever. But but you never actually have to deal with the consequence of you just killed that enemy, right? I mean, just you leveled up, whatever, there's like some game loop. And I wanted to say, like, okay, what if you actually get the consequence yourself? Like, if you might suffer from, like, you kill, like, you bullied your way through the board. Great, now you're stuck being a pawn. You lost all your powers, or like if you're a pawn, you can actually usurp your way into like a higher role and so on. And so anyway, and I think that there's a couple of other ideas like that. So I think having some kind of like thesis on like what is it that I'm trying to like innovate on is a good starting point. And then design constraint that I mentioned, putting like, okay, I'm starting with just this board, and like it has to be like just chess language. Keep it simple, sculpt it down. And then the third one being playtesting, like just the ingredients are there, and then with enough iteration, just magic happens. And I think it's a reproducible formula. It's still like like just a formula. So I think people have to just try it and get real people to play it.
I have a couple of questions. They're all sort of tech or execution questions, because we've talked a lot about the design. My favorite part was where you referred to me as a knight, because if you talk to my wife, I'm more of a pawn.
He's also wearing a Slayer t-shirt, so goes with the whole knight concept.
That's
there.
right.
Very true. Very true.
So you came up with a game, you iterated on it, which, by the way, that hits so hard for us. We're huge fans of iterating. We 100% agree with you and evangelize the idea that you should get things into people's hands as soon as possible, because the masses are the truth. What's in your brain is often not quite the truth. It might be on the direction of truth, but the masses tell the truth. And so you need it in there. How did you go from this idea? Now you've coded it up. You did this all on your own. You coded it up, you got it ready, you put it somewhere to get it into the hands of the public or people you don't know, people you're not specifically bringing in to play test. How did you do that? What did you do?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Okay, before I answer this, I think excellent question. Just touching on one thing you just said, JD, I think it's very true. The masses, I've been guilty of that like so many times. Like when sometimes someone tells you something, okay, like it sounds like a cool, interesting truth. I agree with this, but then you don't actually apply it. I think for anyone here who's hearing like your wise words about like just get into the masses, get out of your own head, please pause, maybe rewatch this what he said, and don't just like let it like go over you. Like don't make my mistake. Actually put it in action. And I'll tell you why. I think when people used to tell me like trust the masses, not yourself, and all these different things, I used to take it as advice as like the masses are wiser than you are, or like maybe there's wisdom in crowds. If you maybe you're a very smart person, but if you add like 100 smart people together, they're smarter than you. And I think obviously there's some of that, but I think there's something that I've come to realize much more. It's not just that. There's an element that with enough mistakes you actually learn, is that even if like you can clone yourself, like let's say like CJD, smartest person on earth, could get 100 CJD clones, right? And that's why they call CJD, because it's clones. Yeah, the clones of Jason, right? Duplicates, the CJD. Anyway, so you have 100 CJD clones. And the question is, are you wiser than a random CJD clone, or are you the same? And I think this thing you're just describing still applies. Like you should not trust yourself, you trust a CJD clone. And here's why. When they're all clones, right? So that shouldn't matter. But I think the vantage point matters so much. When you're the person who is in the creative process, you're creating something. First of all, you're biased so much, right? You're gonna be like attached to it. Second of all, like you already like put in the work, and now like you have like sunk costs or whatever. But third of all, much more importantly, even if like you're detached from it magically, I don't know, like you have like stoic personalities or whatever, I think just by virtue of you being in a creative mode of like let's come up with ideas and let's eliminate the ones that are bad and brainstorm and kind of like let's execute whatever, you're in the wrong mental mindset that you should be in as a CJD clone to evaluate something objective by looking at it and be like, was this fun or not? And I think it's almost like a universal human condition. So like you just it's impossible to break out of this unless you're like a simulation of made or whatever. Anyway, I just thought it was a really good point. Hopefully people actually take your advice. I wish my own
No, it is a really I love the explanation there.
Okay. Well, let me get to like the actual technical part. So I think it's what you touched on, GG, is not just technical. It's technical, but also like how do you like get like where do you start? Like you both like okay. I think like I'm throwing all these like like hot takes. Hopefully one of them is useful. Whatever is not useful, please throw it out. But how we're saying like I really think you should just start with like something small, iterate on it, and just get it out. I think there's something very similar with from a building like engineering perspective. I think just get out of localhost, right? Just instead of just building it on your own machine and just be like, hey, like someone wants to play, and but just honestly, just get it out in a shareable way. Like that's the most important first step. And you know, they might have a lot of things in the flow that are broken. That's fine, and you can just work around them. You know, send it to first. You can send it to a friend who would know how to, like, you know, open a link and just play around on a device that doesn't look like great. You know,
Yeah.
I wish I had, like, I'm pretty sure I have a picture somewhere of like the first version that I actually shared with someone. It's hilarious, and especially on a giant monitor, you see like the next level button is like all the way like this, and some like weird
Yeah.
neon color.
Yeah.
It looks like it's disgusting, but at least it's playable, right? And then that's
Mhm.
the you're trying to reproduce that feeling of physical prototype in
Yep.
the digital world, right? That's something that's shareable. Try it out, iterate, whatever. But then honestly, what you can do these days, again, as I was saying earlier, like we're so lucky these days. Like we live in a society and like a modern era where you can just literally put something online, like literally, like,
Yep.
and people really underestimate this. I think we just take it so much for granted, man. It's almost like fridges. Like when did you ever stop and be like, oh my god, we can actually store meat and it doesn't go bad? You know,
Yeah.
it's mind blowing. There used to be this whole industry of people like shipping salt across the world just so like they can use salt for like meat, like wars around it. Now we have fridges. We take it for granted. I think people take for granted that we have like the internet where you can just drop something and then it takes a life of its own. And people can share it, and you can share it to other friends and so on. So anyway, I think the short version is like iterate, put it online, share it to people, and then make it. Oh, that's a really important one. I think, yeah, something we did not touch on. I think it's actually very important. I would encourage people to think about in their first earliest version of a prototype, like once it's beyond just like a mechanic, you know what you want to build, like as a first, you know, iteration. Also bake into it like, and how will this be shared? You know, even if it's just like,
Yep.
and then people will be
The
able to share. And
distribution. The
yeah, I
distribution.
think
Yep.
it's so important. I think it's so important. I'll give an example like from our private alpha we have now with like the map maker, you know, like the echo maker where you can create your own echoes or puzzles for echo
Yep.
chess. The very first version, like we just said, we made actual engineering decisions, like just change things around, like kind of, you know, uh, got us out of our comfort zone just so that the very first version, you can copy paste the URL and someone can take that same puzzle you just created and then remix it from there. And then that's a
Yeah.
very intentional decision, by the way. You could have spent that time building other stuff. You know, you could have said like, well, that's like a lower priority feature for later. But I think it's so important to make something shareable and replayable way before you over engineer, because this is how you get more and more CGID clones to try it and then
Yeah.
be able to build on top of it. And that's where you get interesting ideas.
You actually want AJ and Vineet clones because they consistently beat me on the moves. So they're the better clones to be playing this. Well, that's cool. So you built this game, you got it out there. So we've known you for a little bit. You've now hired, you've got staff, you got helpers. You're no longer just on a lonely island fighting the big fight against so many fronts. What's it like now?
Well, it's well, okay. First of all, I feel super grateful, you know, that we have a team now. Obviously, not like, I know you're saying it jokingly, but not like, you know, staff or about. It's just like literally teammates. They're doing like,
Yeah.
you know, amazing work. They're awesome. I mean, I'm very very grateful, you know, for the team we built, and obviously want to keep growing. You know, hiring more. If there's any like smart folks watching this, you know, like, hey, like I like games, I like tech, whatever. Just reach out. You know, you never know. Sometimes, honestly, some of the most interesting things start so organically. Like you don't. I think the thing
Yeah.
also I would advise, and I've seen it on like all fronts, right? As like someone who's like hiring, someone who's looking for a job, someone who's like being asked like for reference, like whatever, any kind of shape or form of the industry over the years. I think one thing that people underappreciate is like when a company is this small, sometimes they haven't thought of all the potential amazing things that could happen if they meet the right person. So they might be
Yeah.
starting, hey, I need like X person like to help us get to the next stage. But then Y person comes in and they're like, interesting. Well, you know, like we're kind of like a tiny startup. I guess we could change our roadmap a little bit and then, you know, maybe like do this earlier. And I think this is
Yeah.
very powerful. So I think that's great. Okay. But how does it feel? I think more pragmatically, I think it feels great. And then constantly like, you know, like there's a million things we want to be doing and there's not
Yeah.
enough time. And then just like, I don't know if this will ever stop. It's almost like you're kind of like just always jumping like, hey, like this was great, but look at all these awesome things we could be doing. And it's such a bigger vision. And it's always that process. And I think it's probably the biggest challenge, I think, honestly, of like a founder journey is like you never get to really like just pause and reflect and take it in before you continue, because you're always like, you know, paranoid about all the things that could go wrong and also excited about all the things that
You're
could happen.
running a marathon, man. So like it's just you can't stop. You just keep going.
For sure. But one thing I think that's like less philosophical and I think more pragmatic and actionable one thing I've learned also with a lot of mistakes is that it really helps. As like as you said it very nicely, EJD, that like now like you have help. You no longer you against the world, whatever. And actually like hopefully some of the world is also realizing, oh, that's actually a nice vision. Let's kind of join in and help with it. I
Yeah.
think one thing that um, I think is super important is kind of thinking about it as like how do I ideally if everything goes well, we're able to attract like awesome people who just want to join this quest. How do I make it a goal that like over time I make more and more aspects of what I've been doing obsolete, and I become the worst person to be doing this because we have the best person in the world to be doing this instead. And I
Yeah.
think people sometimes have like the opposite instinct, which is, well, I started this company, like, but I start. I don't know how much you guys can see in it, but this is like literally this is like a closet, like a walk-in closet that I actually
Right.
retrofitted with like all these board games, and I'm using it as like an office. This is where EchoChess started. I think like this is probably gonna be my office for a long time. I love this place. I'm also someone who doesn't like glare, so like I don't like working next to windows, a lot of light. I can be like gaming at 4 a.m. and just like it's nice like this. So I mean, I think starting from this is like the journey is great, but I think sometimes people can get into like the wrong conclusion, which is, well, I was able to get so far with just myself, then like I need to like kind of fight the urge to let go of some things, and like I need to keep owning like certain areas and whatever. And I think honestly that's so counterproductive because so many reasons. One, like you're really like missing out on like the multiplier effect. Like you might be a smart person, but there's so many people that are smarter. But also like
Yeah.
there's just more people. There's more CJD clones out there. And then together, like the sum is more than the parts. And so I think like if you don't allow yourself just to let go, I think you're gonna miss out on this. Second one is again all the biases, whatever I described. But I think third one, honestly, is like it's just way more fun when you're able to like work with people who are like so much at the top of their game in any particular dimension that you've been kind of filling in the gaps. And like like that first version of EchoChess I built, great. I built like the AI, like the front end, back end, whatever. Does that mean I'm like the best front end engineer in the universe? Of course not. I just did what I had to do just to get
Yeah.
like the game from like where it was to where it needs to be. And it's almost like if you think of like you're trying to climb like a ladder. I think of like if I'm at this rung in the ladder, how do I make it so that we have the best odds to get to the next rung in the ladder, maybe the one after, and we have some kind of visibility, you see like the next 10 somehow. But like we just need to worry about how to get to the next rung, and then once we're there, we can worry about the next
Yeah.
one instead of like having to worry about the one like a million ones farther. But if I'm really starting my journey, I'm like, hey, like I need to always be the person getting us there. Like we're never gonna get there. So anyway, I think like the short version, like how does it feel now? It feels great, exciting, scary, and like, paranoid, and so many things. Not enough time in the day, but also hopefully like I'm doing a better job like making myself obsolete over time. And we have the luxury of having like great people helping us and great investors, great partners, obviously like you guys, and like like a platform like Snap, so you can just use stuff instead of reinventing the wheel, and you can focus on the actual game. I think like it's things that yeah, we definitely want to like make use of more and leverage better.
So it's a
Yeah,
great
you're.
seg. Yeah. Sorry, Siri, go on.
I was just going to say, which maybe you're about to segue into, but I was just going to say, so you have a team that you're working with, your teammates, as you said, and now you mentioned investors, and oftentimes with investors, there's all sorts of things you can leverage with your investors. So your doors have opened up even further. That's not just money, of course, although money is the big thing that keeps you going. It's undeniable. So now you have investors with resources. How's that feel?
Yeah, I
And
think
more
honestly,
importantly, I
yeah,
think I want to also congratulate Sammy on getting into speedrun, which for those who don't know, is the A16Z gaming accelerator, and he has a bunch of really awesome heavyweights on his cap table. I heard Mark has invested, the CEO of Zynga, the founder and CEO of Zynga. So yeah, you have a good set of people, behind you now. What's like? We're obviously towards the end of this podcast. We would love to, close this out with what's your vision for Echo Chunk and Echo Chess? You see this into a big game studio with multiple puzzle games. Where do you see yourself a couple years down the line?
100%. I think, by the way, like obviously, don't want to just let it slide. I'm feeling incredibly lucky and thankful and grateful for all the investors. I think it's great. It's like CJG said it. Like it's definitely not just like the money. The money lets you get to the next part of the ladder a little
Yeah.
bit. But first of all, you might be climbing the wrong ladder. You need people tell you like, "Yo, what you're doing is wrong."
Yeah.
Listen to like wisdom. People who have done it a million times before. Like kind of like yourself, AJ. You guys have built this like so many times before. Like obviously like Mark Pincus, like Steph, who heads like AI at Roblox, Pat Wyatt, that did like amazing strategy
Yeah.
games, Warcraft, like anyway, etc. I need people who have been around and like know what they're doing, and also can like keep you objective, and also like give you like excellent advice. There's also like I think it's great because I think people like to. I mean, just talking about myself, I think people like to like be part of something that like, hey, let's all together try to do something that's bigger than ourselves. And I think it's something I think it's so important, so powerful. That's how just beyond just investors, and you get people who have no skin in the game in some sense, but are still super excited to help out, and they just
Yeah.
will volunteer their help. People in the community, players, be like, yo, I tried this, and like here's some potential new sound effect you want to use, right? Or like, hey, I built this crossword game that was amazing. This is what we learned about puzzles. If you want to take my advice, that's great. And I think it's so important to be able to think beyond just yourself and like let the company game have a life of its own. So I'm feeling super grateful to be happy. Very excited for Speedrun, of course. I think A16Z have been amazing. It's so great to work with. They're awesome. And then, as you guys said, they also have obviously like this platform, other like marketing help, like obviously
Yep.
creator help, like even like things like HR, all sorts of things. I think it's almost like an unfair advantage, to be honest, for a startup to have all this help. It's great. So I guess like, okay, what's next for EchoChunk, and like what's kind of like the long term vision we're working for? So short term, very short term, then mid term, and then long term. Very short term, obviously, we're building EchoChess. We're gonna make it better, man. There's so many things we want to do there. I was saying earlier, more game modes, different modalities, take it to the next level, and obviously like midterm, like coming up with new things that people want to experience with the same game and new games, and always focusing on like really cool, kind of strategy games and puzzle games that are great for everyone and people can get into, that are very easy to learn and hard to master. And then, as I mentioned earlier, actually, I should have mentioned earlier, like obviously like the puzzle mechanic we're describing. And for whoever hasn't tried EchoChess, you can go to echochess.com, play it every day. There's like, every 24 hours, new puzzles on the classic and epic side. But also there's a really exciting third mode called Blitz mode, kind of like Blitz chess. We actually called it Zen mode at the beginning. That was a big fail. People are like, bro, this is not Zen. It's very stressful. I'm racing against the clock. I feel like, yeah. So we kind of changed it to Blitz mode by just literally calling the community.
From Zen to Blitz.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny because like things you don't think about, right? I mean, you feel like you just been in building mode and you don't think about these things, but it actually makes sense because someone coming in, like, okay, I want to play a Zen mode where I'm just relaxing, like there's no time limit, there's nothing, and
and this was a stressful thing where you had to complete things on a timer. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But if you think about it as like what it actually meant to be, which is almost like a Tetris mode, you're trying to clear stages and then new ones keep getting generated, and you get combos and you win time back on the clock. You're racing against time, but you can actually prolong your run. It's like like a roguelite or Tetris mode, or in chess like Blitz chess, where speed matters a little bit more than accuracy. I think this is what we're trying to build. Like, we just named it wrong. But anyway, the cool thing there is like it's actually using that like AI process I was describing, where basically every time you need like a new board to be created, you can generate it in real time, and you can check like kind of the solvability or difficulty, and you're able to actually rank different game states. Because a level in any game, but especially in chess, let's say, like a level is actually just the special case of a starting configuration of where the board state was. But a board state is a board state, right? Every single move you have a new board state. And so more broadly, think about it. If you have an AI model that can actually really score well every single state of the game, whether it's like more difficult, less difficult, like to be solvable, things like, just more like to be fun and so on. Now what you're able to do is like much more powerful. Like right now while we're using it and it's already live, people can play it with Blitz mode. You can create things in real time, every time you clear stages. But actually like the same exact process, same tech that actually scores your game states. It gives you feedback on like whether that's like harder or less hard or like more likely to be in the direction you're going with. You can actually use it for the creation process. Like when you're creating as a level designer, as a game designer, and so on. And so for example, we use it in-house when we're trying to come up with like interesting, like seeds for ideas of different puzzles and boards. And it's always, the blank canvas problem. Like if you have any kind of design to like open Blender or like Unity scene, it's all empty. And you're like, okay, I don't know where to start, man. Like I guess I'm going to put a tree or something, right? It's always so much easier to start from something that you can mold and edit. I think that's super helpful for like a co-creation process for us. And then also like, it's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, where people can remix each other's puzzles, which is great. Start from something and be like, okay, that was a good puzzle. I can make it more interesting. And so this is where we get to like the long-term vision that I feel like actually, sometimes in your mind it's so obvious and then like the world catches up or you just were wrong. I like to think that like we see it where others are not seeing it. And this is where the industry is going. I think where the industry is going, like because we have such powerful tools like AI, across the whole tech stack, but specifically like, kind of like the recipe of game making, you can just think of game design. I think we're getting to a point where like you really like become a better creative person, a better creator, because you have real-time feedback from something, that entity that has seen a gazillion different game states of this and can actually give you an input. I'll give you a last example. I know I've been talking for a while. If you look at games that have tried to do like really good UGC, like user generated content, and by try to, I don't mean like, hey, like let's trick our users. They're actually exploring something that the players can find fun to create and find real value. Like, why would I contribute content to this game? I think like there's always the interesting part when you're trying to come up with levels or maps or mods or mazes, where you have like this dilemma. Like the really good level designers, or like the players in the community who love creating levels and maps and puzzles, are probably not the same type of persona who are the speedrunners or people who are really, really good gamers and players who will break your level and find like something even better. So I mean, you know how it is, right? And sometimes they are, it's great, it's amazing, but most of the time it's not that. And what happens is that if you're like someone who wants to create maps or mazes, mods, whatever, you actually don't know as you're creating it if you're still making like a solvable puzzle, like it's even an interesting puzzle, until you're done and you get someone to play it. And so I think one thing that's interesting that like Mario Maker has done, it's really cool. It's basic. I think it was a big step up in the industry. Maybe someone did it before them. Sorry, I'm misquoting them. But basically, from what I remember, Mario Maker is like you have the concept of like, you can only submit a map that you've created if you can solve it at least once yourself. You were the human that actually came up with this. Can you finish the full run? You've actually solved it. Great. And now that's an interesting puzzle for the community to try, or like a platform level, right? And I think that's great. But as I mentioned earlier, you're probably not the hyper tapper, like the speedrunner person. So like, how are you going to get interesting stuff out of it? So I think this is where AI can really help. Like as you're creating things, think of echo chess. Every single time you're putting a new obstacle on the board, you're putting a new piece, you're changing the knight from white to black, you're putting a pawn there. You can get real-time feedback telling you from this model, like, okay, I made this level slightly harder, slightly easier. You can get like more feedback on it, and think of this much more broadly than just long term. Honestly, any kind of creative process for deterministic games, for information, and just beyond that as a genre, if you have an AI model helping you as a co-pilot as you're creating, now what happens is that like the studios creating games can get much more interesting games, but more importantly, the community and players can be much better creators without having to know anything about AI, about tech. You can just play around with tools. So this is kind of like where we see the industry going, where we're trying to have like a dent. But we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sammy. I think it's been a very fun conversation with you. We can't really wait to see you where you take this company a year down the line. We'll definitely invite you again, year or more down the line to see and have a conversation again. We do end up chatting almost every other day, so it's always a pleasure working with you. But thank you for your time. Hopefully you had fun, and all the best to Echo Chess, and we're really looking forward to all the big announcements you're making this week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. This was a lot of fun. Honestly, I enjoyed it a lot. Always down to this, and I can't wait to meet all these clones when you guys make them. go hang out and like just like.
I'm not sure AJ or Vinny look forward to me having clones.
Hey man, we're short-staffed. I think I can use a few CJD clones, right?
Yeah,
so
maybe.
By the way, just for the record, like, none of us here is condoning human cloning. Just obviously, it's a thought experiment. Thought experiment, guys.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, folks.
Thanks a lot, guys.